It is faster, stronger, deadly. And it has returned to devour and destroy.
Hey folks, this is Kalani. We're going to be looking at Tequatl the Sunless. Now, specifically, we're going to be looking at how you can take down Tequatl the Sunless after he got all those good buffs. So, first things first, where are we? We are in, or rather, we're at the Splintered Coast in Sparkfly Fen. Now, this is obviously located south of Lion's Arch, and is where you'll find a lot of Zergs, a lot of overflows, and hopefully Tequatl. So, first thing we need to do is basically get used to what we have to work with. We have the Tequatl fight itself, we've got the turrets, which are paramount to your success, we've got the Mega Laser, which you're going to have to protect and charge up if you want any hopes of destroying Tequatl, and then there's the batteries, which charge the Mega Laser, which you can see one in the background over there, one in the background over there, and there's one just behind us. So there's the last one. So there's 3 batteries, 1 Mega Laser, 6 turrets, and 1 Tequatl. So let's have a look, see how this pans out on the map. So if we take a zoomed in picture of the map we've got, and we can happily start drawing on it. Now, towards the southwest is where you'll fight Tequatl. That's where he'll be. That's obviously where your main force will need to be to do the most damage possible to Tequatl. And that's where, in the phases where he's stunned, a lot of you will be grouping up. Now, that's also basically where you've got the majority of your play space. We'll talk about play space a little bit later, because there's a few things which are going to restrict that, and you'll obviously have to deal with them. Now, towards the north and east, we've got 2 lines of 3 turrets. Now, these turrets are paramount to the fight. You'll need to know exactly what you're doing if you're going to be on a turret, because they do make or break this encounter. Obviously, then behind that, we've got the Mega Laser, and we've got the batteries, which you'll need to preferably use the pads to get to, because they'll skip you over there nice and quickly. Now, basically, this fight is going to transition between 2 main phases. One being where you'll essentially focus on Tequatl, and the other being where you'll focus on the Mega Lasers and the batteries. So, let's get comfortable with what we've got to work with. So, first and foremost, the pads. Now, these are used to transfer yourself very quickly between the various battlefields. These can transport you between the batteries and the Mega Laser, such as this one. They'll take you back. And from the Mega Laser to the turret lines. Now, all you have to do is jump on it and use your interact key, or press F. You can even right click on them. That's it. It's that simple. Next up are the turrets. Now, if we've got a free one anywhere here, bingo! So, you've got 5 abilities. Now, 4 of these are incredibly key to the encounter. Number 1 is just a damage ability. This is complete filler. You don't have to use it at all, though it's nice to use it in between abilities. Now, number 2 is probably one of the most important ones. It does no damage, but it removes a stack of Tequatl's hardened scales. Now, hardened scales doesn't do anything until it gets to 20, and at 20, Tequatl will summon a bone spike wall and become invulnerable. Now, that's obviously not ideal. It wastes time where you have to take down the bone wall, and basically it's overall damage reduction onto Tequatl, meaning you're going to take longer to take him down, meaning you may just run out of time. So it's very, very, very important you keep those stacks down if you're on a turret. Basically, you want to be using that on cooldown, especially if Tequatl's got more than 3 stacks. If he's got more than 3 stacks, turrets using it on cooldown will keep it very low indeed. Number 3 is Poison Cleanse. During the fight, you'll have poison. It's an AoE, so it's basically a puddle of poison, and it does insane damage. The only way to get rid of it is Poison Cleanse from the turrets. Now, these poison clouds are thrown by the fingers of Tequatl. Those are the little spiny things which pop up. You can reflect the AoE. So they kind of throw the projectile when it lands where it's supposed to land, it spreads into the AoE. They can be reflected, so that's one way to deal with it, but if any do appear on the map, then it's the turret's job to use Poison Cleanse to get rid of them. Now, number 4 is Hylic Elixir. Now what this does is throws down an AoE area. May as well do it on myself. Now in that area, everybody, or I think it's actually AoE capped, so that would be 5 people, gain ticking Fury, Might and Swiftness. Sorry, Quickness. So if we it's a little far. We'll get it onto Jackie here. Now remember that it's kind of a pulsing ground aura, so anyone who steps outside of it will no longer get it, meaning that basically a Zerg needs to stack up on top of it. You can see they do stack with all the other turrets, so all the turrets focusing on one area is kind of nice. You can either do it all turrets on one area, or 3 turrets on one area, 3 turrets on another. It really depends on your group composition. We'll get to that a little later. So that's basically a DPS increase aura, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, it really is. Quickness, Might and Fury on a 1 second tick every 8 seconds. Sorry, on a 1 second tick for 8 seconds with a 15-second cooldown, with 6 turrets able to do that, is kind of ridiculous. And then 5 is basically the kind of opposite. You fire it and it gives everybody who's hit a nice, basically regen. It's defenses instead of aggression. So you've got Vigor, Regen and Protection, and that's for 6.5 seconds every 15 seconds. So basically you're buffing the raid, or the Zerg, or your friends. It's very important that you do that. Using them is so overpowered. It's basically how your group is going to have the damage to take down Tequatl. So those are the abilities. I'd recommend if you want to be on a turret, to grab a turret as early as you can and practice. Just fire stuff off. When people are getting ready, just continually fire into the raid. Fire your poison in random directions. Just make sure that you're able to really control the turret properly, because these are paramount. I cannot stress that enough. The turrets are key to this fight. If you've got 6 people on turrets who don't know what they're doing, you're not going to take Tequatl down. So it's definitely worth mentioning. Okay, so we can start to get into the fight itself. Now, the first thing is preparation. If you want the best chances, and obviously this is min-maxing, but if you do want the best chances, you're going to need food, buffs and positioning, really. So for food, you're going to want something which increases your power, toughness or vitality for that good buff. Remember that precision and crit damage are worthless here because you can't actually crit Tequatl. They are somewhat worthwhile in the turret defense groups because obviously you can crit the mobs which are going to be spawning there, but not Tequatl. So if you're in a Zerg group, preferably having power, vitality, toughness gear, simply because you can't crit him, so those stats are going to be wasted. But you're going to need your groups set up properly, and you can do this in a variety of ways. Now, if we just have a quick look at how I've got the groups positioned here, you can see we've got 4 commanders, and that's 2 Zerg groups. You can use 1, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we use 2, and 2 turret groups. Now obviously the turret group contains those using the turrets as well as those defending. And obviously there's 2 lines of 3 turrets, so that's 2 turret groups. Now we run 2 Zerg groups simply because of the play space. Now I mentioned earlier, play space is basically how much room you have to work with in the Tequatl fight. This is severely limited by the poison clouds which you can see going down. Now the advantage of using 2 Zerg groups is that if a lot of poison is thrown at your single huge Zerg group, a lot of people are going to go down, meaning that a lot more people need reviving, because if the poison gets there, it's already done the damage before it can get cleansed from the turrets. Now, there's a way to avoid this, and that's reflections. You can see the amount of focuses from the elementalists using the destroy projectiles. that'll destroy any of the poison clouds coming in. We've got Walls of Reflection, we've got Shields of the Avenger, I believe. Basically we've got a lot of reflects happening on our Zerg groups, and it's just easier to contain 2 Zerg groups. Now if you are using 2 Zerg groups, your turret group 1 should be focusing on buffing your Zerg group 1, and your turret group 2 should be focusing on buffing your Zerg group 2, just so you've got all of the buffs available to both Zergs. Now, it kind of doesn't matter between 2 and 1, because all of your abilities are going to be AoE capped anyway, meaning that you're not losing anything by splitting your group, and you're actually gaining play space, because if your Zerg's contained in one area, that area has to remain free of poison, otherwise you cannot play in your play space. You can move, obviously, but then that requires obviously the Zerg to move, which is not ideal in any situation. So right now, phase 1 is where you will basically spend most of your time. Getting the first 25% off of Tequatl will take you the majority of your timer. This is simply because you don't have the damage increase from the Mega Laser, and it's just straight up damage. You need to protect the turrets, meaning that your turret groups need to be large enough to make sure that all the mobs are dying. Now, bear in mind they don't need to die and then have free time, as long as the last mob is dying as the other ones spawn in. So you can continually attack and defend. As long as those turrets don't die, you're fine. So throwing an absurd amount of people in the defense is not actually a decent strategy. But if you're coordinated enough and basically you can communicate well enough, you can actually pull people between the groups. For example, you'll see a few people running from the defense group into the Zerg simply because they've called, "We've got enough for defending, go Zerg." Or you'll see in the video a little bit later actually, I actually go to defend because they say North needs a few more defenders, so we pull a few out of the Zerg just to make sure that those turrets do stay alive. Your Zerg is where you need the majority of your power, the majority of your punch, because you need to get the health down. If you don't get the health down to 75%, you're not getting the Mega Lasers, you're not going to get Tequatl down. Simple. So that's how phase 1 works. Now, obviously the turrets have the majority of the pressure here. They really need to be on point. If Tequatl gets 20 stacks of his hardened scales, he'll throw up bone walls. This isn't that bad in an organised Zerg. That doesn't sound right, an organised Zerg, but if you're organised and people are on point, it doesn't really matter if the bone wall goes up, but you are wasting time, so it's preferable for those turrets to be doing their job. Now, obviously, you can see the major pain right now is the waves. In this phase, he'll obviously slam the ground, some waves will come through, they do massive damage, but they can be avoided. Now, bear in mind the animation of the wave isn't fully on par with its damage, so the very, very, very tip of the wave, the very first thing that you see, is the damage. So as long as you jump over that, you can happily land in the middle of the wave, as long as you jump over the very initial part of the wave. You won't take the damage, you won't get knocked back. Obviously that's difficult with lag and all the things going on, the frames, that kind of thing. It's not ideal. You can dodge roll through them, so that may be an option. Apart from that, phase 1 is relatively straightforward. The fingers can be dealt with either by your Zerg group, by your defense group, by a group specifically for the fingers, if that's the way you want to go, or simply by reflects. As long as if you keep reflects upon your Zerg, the fingers shouldn't be too much of a problem. But any ranged which can turn around and whack down a few fingers, that's brilliant. Remember, this is going to be dependent on players making plays. You need to be on point with yourself, damaging everything that you need to damage. Tequatl is a good priority. Defenders need to take out everything attacking the turrets. As long as they stay off the turrets, you're doing a fabulous job. And any fingers that are in range, there's no harm throwing down a few AoEs or a few hits on those as well. Remember, if you do have AoE capabilities for reflection, for projectile destruction, do throw them into the Zerg. Anything which can increase damage, do that as well. Anything which can spam defences, water fields, regeneration, protection, you need to get those in there as well. So a lot of it is basically spamming abilities and making sure those buffs are available to your Zerg. When you get to 75%, you'll transition into Phase 2. So the first change is another ability. Now, this ability will throw whirlpools all over the watery section of the area, which means that you've got another thing to avoid. Now, if you do get sucked under, all you need to do is swim upwards to one of the lights. That's as simple as this mechanic is. While you're down here, you'll take damage over time, so bring a heal. Any regen that you can throw out, any AoE heals, any AoE regen, always helpful. Any movement increase abilities, such as Warrior 5, Elementalist 5 in water, that kind of thing, just to dash upwards to get yourself out of there as quickly as possible. Now, we want to be using the pads to throw ourselves over to the Mega Laser and the batteries. You need to defend all the batteries and the Mega Laser until the time runs out. When the time runs out, the Mega Laser fires, stuns Tequatl, and you've got a nice increase of damage. This is literally just an easy defend event. What does need to happen here, however, is adaptation. For example, if the batteries are not losing health, but the Mega Laser is getting chunked down horribly, people need to move. People need to assist that Mega Laser, get those mobs off of it, and make sure this event completes. Without this event completing, you're not going to defeat Tequatl. Okay, so when the timer gets below 20 seconds, it's kind of 20 seconds, 15 seconds, that kind of deal, you need to head back towards Tequatl. This is because basically there's no chance, or at least if you've managed to do the event with a decent amount of health left on the batteries and Mega Laser, there's no chance of those being defeated and destroyed within the 15 seconds that you can take to get back to Tequatl, to make sure you've got plenty of time to prepare for him landing, basically so he lands right on top of you, so there is no time wasted for damage potential. You need to burn Tequatl in this phase. He's taking extra damage. Remember that your groups need to get back into position, so your Zergs need to get back into position around Tequatl. You still need to defend your turrets, so bear that in mind. Turrets need to be throwing out the poison cleanse and the buffs towards the Zerg, and you need to burn down Tequatl. This is because you're not going to have the same amount of time you had for the first 25%. You need to get him down to the point where within the next minute or so, you're going to be back into the Mega Laser phase. Basically, the first 25% is your test. Get to that, you can fire the Mega Laser, you can get the burn phase. If you get down to anywhere near 50% there, you're looking really, really good. Basically, as soon as you get to 50%, back to the Mega Laser. Bear in mind, while in a Mega Laser phase, the timer does freeze, so this gives you extra time. Now, with that, you can then get into another burn phase, and basically get down to 25% in the next burn phase. Another laser phase, and then you're basically getting towards the end. So, as soon as you get to the 75% mark, and then reliably get through that Mega Laser event, to the point where you can get a lot of damage down during this burn phase, you're looking good. It's just, literally from there, it's rinse and repeat. As long as you manage everything properly, you can basically repeat what you've been doing. You're going to be able to take Tequatl down within the next few attempts. It literally from there is just a case of time and damage. If you're finding that you're running out of time, this means that potentially your Zerg is not as strong as it could be. So remember, things like food, potions of undead slaying, getting the right buffs, making sure you don't have too many people defending. Any extra person is more damage on Tequatl, is less time it takes to get to 75%, is more time you've got to kind of slack through the other burn phases. It's like, if you get to the 75% mark faster, then you've got more time to necessarily not get as much damage during the burn phase. It's kind of leeway here and there. But remember that that's basically what this is. This is going to be a damage race for you, so maybe that's one thing to look at. If you do not get this down within the time limit, maybe you need to shift more people into your Zerg and have your defenders either work more efficiently or swap a few people about. It really is amazing how much group coordination is required for Tequatl, which is really fun, and it's really promising going forward for PvE, or rather constructed PvE. People have been wanting this for a long time. I just hope that people would rather learn and kind of play and improve to beat the encounter, rather than want it to be nerfed, which there have been quite a few cries on the forums about. But that's Tequatl. Get your group together, get everything organised, remember to be coordinated. Kind of, if somebody's trying to take the lead, don't be a complete tool and kind of, why should I follow you? If you've got that mindset, try lead it yourself. Honestly, you'll soon realise that it's actually pretty difficult, not only to step up and try to get people organised, but to control everyone as well. If you simply don't care for this, then don't go. That's all I can say, but either which way, I hope a few more of you can get this down on your main servers. I know, sadly, we had to go into an overflow to organise this simply because my server wasn't really getting there, and I wanted to do this as soon as possible. So there are a few guilds out there. Try and join TEQ, I can't remember the actual name of it, or the Tequatl Kill Squad. Those kind of things. You might get it down with those. So that's literally all there is to it. Apart from that, it's coordination, it's practice, and making sure you get the most out of things. Now, a few hints and tips before we close. Things like banners. Banners are very, very, very good for group buffs, especially your war banner. War banners are brilliant for reviving people who get knocked down by the poison or by the waves. Magic, honestly. Ice bows. Ice bow number 4 does insane amounts of damage to Tequatl. Fiery greatswords, if you know the trick, inverted commas, or bug if you really want to call it that, they work brilliantly. Don't target Tequatl and run through him with Fiery Rush. That is an amazing amount of damage as well. Remember, you've got all your reflects from your Guardian, you've got your projectile destruction from your Elementalists, that kind of thing. I don't think feedback will work very well unless you target it on a specific finger, so maybe not so much that. But you've got all your group buffs as well, remember to throw those down, all your time warps, and I cannot stress, once again, how important it is for your turrets to be able to be turrets. You really need to know what you're doing on those turrets. If you're really keen to be on a turret, practice before the fight comes up, so you know you've got a decent understanding of how the abilities work, because those turrets really do make or break this encounter. I've said it once again, and I won't stop saying it. So, thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.